The auction block was a wagon bed in the center of town. Clara May Hutchins stood on it with her infant daughter pressed against her chest, wrapped in a quilt so thin the November wind cut through it like it was made of paper. The baby was 4 months old. She had not cried in 2 days. Not from cold, not from hunger. Clara had learned to recognize the difference between a baby who cried because something hurt and a baby who had stopped crying because nothing helped. The crowd gathered in front of the wagon, mostly men, a few women standing at the back with their arms crossed and their faces set in the kind of judgment that came easy when you had never stood on a wagon bed yourself. There are people who watch suffering and people who end it. If you have ever been the one who stopped the crowd and said enough, drop the name of your city in the comments. I want to know how far mercy travels when it costs something real. Subscribe if you believe some debts are worth paying even when no one asks you to. Because what happened when the sun went down in Bear Creek Ridge that day in 1878 changed the way an entire town understood the difference between buying and saving. Clara's husband had been dead for 6 weeks. Cholera took him on a Wednesday. She buried him on a Thursday in a grave she dug herself because the town had quarantined their homestead and no one would come near it. Her nearest neighbor was 4 miles away. By the time someone checked on her, it had been 3 weeks since anyone had seen smoke from her chimney. She had been eating tree bark and boiling leather scraps to make something her body could survive on long enough to keep milk coming for the baby. When the sheriff arrived, he found her sitting on the floor of the cabin with the baby in her lap, and nothing left in the house that could be burned or eaten or sold. The debt collector came the next day. Her husband had borrowed money to buy seed the previous spring. The crop had failed. The loan was due. She had no money, no family, no way to pay. The collector was a man named Fitch, who wore round spectacles and wrote everything down in a leather book, with pages so full of names they looked like a graveyard on paper. He gave her 2 choices: debtor's work camp in Kansas City, where the baby would be taken and given to an orphanage, or indenture. 7 years of labor to anyone willing to pay the debt and take her on. She chose indenture. She had already lost her husband. She would not lose her daughter. The town of Bear Creek Ridge was 3 days' ride from the homestead. The auction was held on a Saturday because that was when the most men came in from the camps and the ranches. The auctioneer was Fitch himself. He stood beside the wagon and read from his book. Clara May Hutchins, age 26, healthy, can cook and clean. Comes with an infant daughter 4 months old. Debt owed, $97. Terms, 7 years labor. Buyer assumes ownership of debt and receives contracted service. Bidding starts at $20. No one bid. Clara stood there with her daughter and stared at the mountains in the distance. She had been stared at all morning, by the women who looked at her body and saw something they could dismiss, by the men who looked at her body and saw something else. She was heavy-set. Her dress was patched in 4 places. Her boots had holes in the soles. The baby's quilt was the only thing she owned that was not broken. $20, Fitch said again. For 7 years of labor, that is less than $3 a year. A man in the front called out, "What about the baby? Baby stays with the mother, part of the contract." Then no bid. I do not need another mouth that cannot work. Clara kept staring at the mountains. Her daughter stirred against her chest. Clara adjusted the quilt. The baby settled. That was all she had left. The ability to make her daughter comfortable for 30 seconds at a time. Fitch looked frustrated. He had 3 more auctions scheduled that day, and this one was taking too long. $15, final offer. If no one bids, she goes to the work camp tomorrow. Silence. Clara closed her eyes. Kansas City. A camp where women broke rocks for 12 hours a day and slept in barracks that smelled like sweat and sickness and despair. And somewhere in that same city, her daughter would be in an orphanage where children died of fever and neglect, and no one wrote their names down because no one remembered them long enough to care. $100. The voice came from the back of the crowd. Deep, rough, the kind of voice that did not get used often. People turned. A man pushed through the crowd. He was tall, broad-shouldered. His coat was wolf fur, and his hat was pulled low enough that his face was mostly shadow. But Clara could see his hands, scarred, calloused, the hands of a man who had worked in country that did not forgive mistakes. Fitch blinked. "Sir, the debt is $97. You are bidding above—" "100, the man said again. He pulled a leather pouch from his coat and dropped it on the edge of the wagon bed. It landed heavy. Coins inside. That covers the debt and $3 for your trouble. Write it down. Fitch opened the pouch, counted. His eyebrows went up. He looked at the man, looked at Clara, looked at the crowd. Then he wrote in his book. Sold to Mr. Cade, Rowan Cade. Sold to Mr. Rowan Cade. Terms, 7 years contracted labor, debt paid in full. Fitch snapped the book shut. He gestured to Clara. She is yours. Rowan Cade did not look at her. He turned and walked toward the edge of town where a horse and a pack mule were tied. Clara climbed down from the wagon. Her legs shook. She had not eaten since the day before, and that had been half a biscuit. She followed him because there was no other choice. The crowd parted. She heard the whispers as she passed. Mountain Man bought himself a woman. And a baby. What is he going to do with a baby? Same thing he does with everything else up there. Work it until it is used up. She kept walking. Her daughter made a small sound against her chest. Clara pressed her lips to the baby's head and kept moving. Rowan Cade stopped beside the horse. He untied it. Then he looked at Clara for the first time. His eyes were blue, cold, but not cruel. There was a difference. She had learned that difference the hard way. You ride? He asked. She nodded. He handed her the reins. You take the horse. I will walk. She stared at him. You bought me. I should walk. You have a baby. Babies do not walk. Get on the horse. She got on the horse. He took the mule's lead rope and started walking north out of town. She followed. No one stopped them. No one said goodbye to her. She had lived near Bear Creek Ridge for 2 years, and not one person in that town knew her name well enough to call it out as she left. They walked for 4 hours. The trail climbed into the pines. The air got colder. Her daughter slept against her chest. Clara's arms ached from holding her, but she did not shift her grip. She would hold her daughter until her arms fell off if that was what it took. The sun was an hour from setting when Rowan stopped. They were standing at the edge of a clearing. A cabin sat in the center, stone chimney, split log walls, neat, small. Smoke came from the chimney. Someone was already there. Clara's stomach dropped. Another man, or men. That was how these things worked. He had bought her. He would share her, or sell her again, or worse. Rowan looked back at her. That is my sister, Nora. She is making supper. Clara exhaled. She had not realized she was holding her breath. They crossed the clearing. Rowan opened the cabin door. A woman looked up from the stove. She was younger than Clara by a few years, dark hair, thin. Her face lit up when she saw them. You brought her, Nora said. She wiped her hands on her apron and crossed the room. She looked at Clara, looked at the baby. Her expression softened. Oh, look at her. What is her name? Clara's voice came out hoarse. Lily. Lily, Nora smiled. Come in, sit down. You look half dead. Clara climbed off the horse. Rowan took the reins and led the animals toward a small barn. Clara walked into the cabin. It was warm. The smell of cooking meat and bread made her knees weak. Nora pulled out a chair at the table. Sit, please. Clara sat. She adjusted Lily in her arms. The baby woke and started to fuss. A thin, tired sound. Nora frowned. When did she last eat? This morning. And you? Clara did not answer. Nora turned to the stove. She filled a bowl with stew, thick with venison and potatoes and carrots. She set it in front of Clara with a chunk of bread. Eat, all of it. Then I will take the baby so you can sleep. Clara stared at the bowl. I do not understand. What is there to understand? You are hungry. There is food. I belong to your brother now, for 7 years. He paid $100. I need to work. Nora pulled out another chair and sat across from her. My brother paid $100 because that is what it cost to get you out of that town before someone else bought you for worse reasons. You are not here to work. You are here to live. Now eat. Clara looked down at the stew. Her hands shook as she picked up the spoon. She took one bite, then another. Then she could not stop. She ate until the bowl was empty and the bread was gone. Nora refilled the bowl without asking. Clara ate that too. By the time Rowan came back inside, Clara had finished 2 bowls of stew, and Lily was nursing in a rocking chair by the fire. Rowan looked at his sister. Nora nodded. He sat down at the table across from Clara. You do not owe me 7 years, he said. Clara stopped rocking. The contract is void. I bought it so I could tear it up. You do not belong to me. You do not belong to anyone. Clara stared at him. Then why did you pay for me? Rowan was quiet for a long moment. Then he stood and walked to the mantel above the fireplace. He picked up a small wooden frame. He brought it back to the table and set it down in front of Clara. It was a photograph. A woman, dark hair, soft eyes, holding an infant wrapped in a white blanket. My wife, Rowan said. Emma, and our son, Daniel. He was 3 months old in that photograph. He paused. They died 2 years ago. Fever took them both in the same week. I buried them in the clearing behind the cabin. Clara looked at the photograph, then at Rowan. His face was still, but his hands on the table were clenched. I was not there when they died, he said. I was in the timber camp, 2 weeks away. By the time I got word and made it home, they had been in the ground for 4 days. Nora buried them. She should not have had to do that alone. He looked at Clara. I saw you on that wagon with your daughter, and I saw Emma. I saw every woman who has ever stood somewhere she did not choose, and held on to the only thing that mattered, because letting go meant losing everything. He stopped. I could not save Emma, but I could save you. Clara's throat closed. She looked down at Lily. Her daughter had fallen asleep nursing. Her small hand was curled against Clara's chest. What happens now? Clara asked. Now you rest, Nora said. Tomorrow we figure out what comes next. But tonight you're safe, both of you. Clara stayed. Not because she was bound by contract, but because there was nowhere else to go, and no strength left to go there. Nora gave her the small bedroom off the main room. It had a bed with a real mattress and blankets that smelled like cedar and lavender. Clara laid Lily down in a wooden cradle beside the bed. Rowan had made it years ago for his son, and then she laid down herself and slept for 14 hours straight. When she woke, the sun was high. She could hear voices outside. She wrapped Lily in the quilt and walked to the door. Rowan and Nora were outside splitting firewood. They worked together with the kind of rhythm that came from years of shared labor. Clara watched them for a moment. Then she stepped outside. Rowan looked up. There is breakfast inside. Help yourself. She fed herself. She fed Lily. Then she walked back outside and asked what needed doing. Rowan and Nora looked at each other. You do not need to, Nora started. I need to do something, Clara said. Please. So they let her help. She hauled water from the creek. She scrubbed pots. She mended a tear in Nora's dress. She peeled potatoes for supper. Small things. Things that did not require much strength, but required steady hands. By evening, she felt more like a person and less like something that had survived by accident. At supper, Rowan asked her what she wanted to do. Not what she could do, what she wanted. Clara thought about it. I want Lily to grow up knowing she was wanted, not knowing she was the reason I lost everything. Rowan nodded. Then you stay here as long as you need. You work if you want. You rest if you need. When you are ready to leave, I will take you wherever you want to go. If you want to stay, you stay. No contract, no debt, no strings. Why? Clara asked. You do not know me. I do not need to know you. I know what it is like to lose everything and have no one stop it from happening. Winter came. Clara stayed. She helped Nora with the work around the cabin. She learned to bake bread in the Dutch oven. She learned to preserve meat and vegetables. She learned to sew buckskin and patch roofs and split kindling. Lily grew fat and healthy. She laughed. She learned to sit up. She learned to grab things and put them in her mouth. She was safe. In January, a man came to the cabin. He was from Bear Creek Ridge, a rancher named Holloway who had been at the auction. He knocked on the door and asked to speak to Rowan. I heard you bought that woman, Holloway said. I am here to make you an offer. I need a cook. I will pay you $50 for the rest of her contract. Rowan stared at him. She does not have a contract. You bought her for 7 years. That means you own 6.5 years left. I tore up the contract the day I bought it. She is not for sale because she is not mine to sell. Holloway frowned. Then what is she doing here? Living. Living? Holloway laughed. You paid $100 for a woman to just live in your house. Yes. That is the dumbest thing I ever heard. Rowan stepped closer. Then you can leave. Holloway left, but he talked. By February, half the territory had heard the story. The mountain man who paid $100 to free a woman and her baby and asked nothing in return. People called him a fool. People called him soft. People said he was wasting money on charity that would never pay him back. In March, a woman came to the cabin. Her name was Sarah. She was younger than Clara, pregnant, alone. She had heard about Rowan. She asked if he would help her, too. Rowan looked at Clara. Clara looked at Nora. Nora smiled. "We have room," Nora said. Sarah stayed. She had her baby in April, a boy. Clara helped deliver him with Nora's guidance. The boy was healthy. Sarah cried when she held him. "I thought I would lose him," she said. "I thought I would end up on a wagon bed in some town selling myself to keep him alive." "Not here," Clara said. "Not anymore." By summer, 3 more women had come, all of them alone, all of them desperate, all of them with children or carrying them. Rowan built another cabin, then another. He bought supplies. He hired men from town to help with the heavy work. He paid them well, and told them if they touched any of the women, they would not make it back down the mountain. The women worked, not because they had to, because they wanted to contribute to the place that had saved them. They farmed, they sewed, they cooked. They built a community in the clearing that had once held only grief. People in Bear Creek Ridge did not understand it. They asked Rowan what he was getting out of it. He never answered. But Clara knew. She had asked him once, late at night when she could not sleep, and found him sitting outside staring at the stars. "You are building the place you wish had existed when Emma needed it," she said. He nodded. "I cannot bring her back, but I can make sure no one else loses everything because no one stopped to help." By the time Lily turned 2, there were 8 women living in the clearing, 12 children. The place had a name now. People called it Cade's Hollow. Some people said it with respect. Some people said it like a joke. Clara did not care. She had a home. Lily had a future. That was all that mattered. On a Sunday in September, Clara was baking bread when Rowan came into the cabin. He looked nervous. She had never seen him nervous before. "Can I ask you something?" he said. She set down the dough. "Of course. You have been here almost 2 years. You have more than repaid any debt you think you owed. You could leave any time, go anywhere. Why do you stay?" Clara wiped her hands on her apron. She looked at him, really looked. At the man who had stood in a crowd and paid twice what he needed to pay, because it mattered more to do the right thing than to do the cheap thing. At the man who had given her a place to sleep and food to eat, and never once asked for anything in return. At the man who had built a community out of grief, because he could not save one person, but he could save many. "I stay because this is the first place I have ever felt like I was worth more than what I could give someone else," she said. "I stay because Lily laughs here. I stay because you taught me that being saved is not the same as being owned." She paused. "I stay because I want to." Rowan nodded slowly. Then he said, "If you stay, I would like it to be as my wife, not as someone I saved, as my partner, if you want that." Clara's breath caught. "You want to marry me?" "I do, but only if you want it too. No obligation, no debt, just choice." Clara thought about the wagon bed in Bear Creek Ridge, the crowd staring, the feeling of being something bought and sold. Then she thought about the clearing, the women, the children, the bread rising in the oven, the life she had built here with her own hands alongside people who saw her as a person, not a problem. "Yes," she said, "I want that." They were married in the clearing in October. All the women came, all the children. Dr. Gaines rode up from Bear Creek Ridge to perform the ceremony because he had heard what Rowan was doing and wanted to see it for himself. Afterward, he shook Rowan's hand and said, "You are building something that will outlast you. I hope you know that." "I am just trying to make sure no one else stands on a wagon bed alone," Rowan said. Years later, when people asked Clara what it was like to be bought, she always corrected them. "I was not bought," she said. "I was freed. There is a difference. One takes your choices away, the other gives them back." Lily grew up in the clearing. She learned to read from Nora. She learned to bake from Clara. She learned to work wood from Rowan. She grew up knowing she was wanted. She grew up knowing her mother had been saved by a man who understood that some things are worth more than money. She grew up knowing that being bought and being chosen are not the same thing. And when she had children of her own, she told them the story of the mountain man who paid $100 not to own a woman, but to set her free. Because some people see suffering and turn away, and some people see suffering and pay whatever it costs to end it. Rowan Cade was the second kind, and the clearing he built became a place where women who had lost everything learned that being saved was only the beginning. The rest was up to them. And they built something that lasted, not because they were owned, but because they were free. That is worth remembering. That is worth more than $100. That is worth everything.